Alrighty, what is up guys? In this video, I'm going to be teaching you how to choose the right rod and reel for your inshore fishing needs. So, the first thing that you're going to need when trying to choose the right rod or reel for your inshore fishing needs is you need to figure out what the heck you're fishing for. So if you don't know what you're targeting, it's going to be really difficult picking the right rod and reel for that specific species of fish that you're fishing for. So I'm just going to run through how I would choose a setup based on what I'm fishing for and based on the situation that I am getting myself into. And hopefully that's going to help guide you guys so when you go out there next time, you can pick the right setup for your own individual needs. So one thing I really like to do, I really like to fish for redfish and trout on the flats in Pine Island Sound. We have some really crystal clear water this time of year, beautiful seagrass, big trout that get holed up in potholes and little deeper depressions in the flats. And then we get some really awesome tailing redfish action in Pine Island Sound and just redfish cruising the flats. There are a lot of opportunities for sight fishing. So if I'm gonna sight fish in particular, I know that I need to make long casts. I need to make very accurate casts. And for that reason, I generally will choose a 7'6", 6 to 12 pound, or an 8 to 17 pound rod. Me personally, I like the 6 to 12 pound a little bit better. It's a little bit lighter weight and it allows me to cast a little bit further in my opinion. And I generally will pair that setup up with a Osprey CE2500. And the reason I choose the 2500 is same reason, it's a little bit lighter weight than an Osprey CE3000. And also I know on my 2500, I have 10 pound test braided fishing line. And so every time I pick up that CE2500, I know exactly what line capacity and how much pound test line I have on that setup. So I will rig my Osprey CE2500 with a 7'6", 6 to 12 pound stealth sniper very specifically for sight fishing for redfish and for trout. Now on this particular setup, I will usually throw a backwards rigged DOA shrimp. And I like that setup. It's very accurate, allows me to cast almost near perfect cast to the fish that I'm looking at. And that's a huge advantage because when you have fish that are sitting in a pothole or you see a tailing redfish coming towards you, you gotta be able to make a quick, accurate cast to get into that strike zone in order to get those fish to eat. And so with my CE2500 7'6", 6 to 12 pound stealth sniper, this thing from top to bottom, it is rigged to sight fish for redfish and trout on the flats. Now, if I'm gonna be on the flats and I don't have good visibility, either it's early in the morning or we have a lot of cloud coverage, or say maybe it's a little bit windy and I can't quite see as well, what I'll do is I'll bump up from a CE2500 with a 6 to 12 pound 7'6" stealth sniper. I'll bump up to a CE3000. And the reason I like the 3000 is generally my CE3000s always have 15 pound test braid. I know every single time I'm picking up a CE3000 that this particular setup is gonna have 15 pound test braid. I know how far it's gonna be able to cast. I know how much line tension I can put when fighting a fish. I always know my CE3000s, they have 15 pound test braid. Now I'll pair that up with a 7'6", 8 to 17 pound stealth sniper. That's where I'll bump up a little bit higher on the rod. If I'm fishing for redfish and trout and I'm blind fishing, I don't need to be as accurate, and generally I'm throwing a little bit of a bigger bait. I'll throw like a bigger swim bait and I'll throw a little bit of a heavier weight, maybe like an 1/8 ounce keeper hook instead of a 1/16 ounce keeper hook. And so that's gonna allow me to cast further with that 15 pound test line anyways. And so I'll use that CE3000 with the 7'6", 8 to 17 pound sniper or stealth sniper rod for my, basically for my search bait. I'll just cast and cast and cast and I'll bomb it as far as I can. I'm covering a lot of water, I'm searching for fish. And once again, I know every single time I pick up that CE3000, I know it has 15 pound test line on it. I know it's gonna be paired with an 8 to 17 pound rod, and that's gonna, it's gonna give me the confidence I need every time I pick up that setup to know exactly what I need to do with it. So transitioning off of the flats, those are my two flat setups. But if I'm fishing for snook or redfish or say jacks up near mangrove shorelines, I'm fishing more in the creeks and I'm throwing artificial baits, that is when I will bump up to an Osprey CE4000. So the CE4000 has a little more line capacity and a little more drag capacity. And for me, on my CE4000, 100% of the time, I put 20 pound test braid on my CE4000. Same thing as all the other setups. When I pick up this setup, I know exactly what braid is on this reel. I know how far it's going to cast. I know how much line capacity is on. I know how much braking strength there is with this line. So that tells me, it gives me the confidence I need to set my drag correctly, to know how much pressure I can put when pulling fish away from structure, away from the mangrove shoreline. So when I'm fishing for snook with artificial baits up on those mangrove shorelines, I really like throwing that CE4000, Osprey CE4000 with 20-pound test braid and a 7'6", 10 to 20 pound rod. Now it's a little bit of a heavier rod than the 8 to 17 pound. Depending on your personal preference, maybe you'd bump down to an 8 to 17, or maybe you'd bump up a 10 to 20, but I like the 10 to 20 because when you hook big snook, say 35 to 40 inch snook, this rod is going to help you turn them, and it's just going to, it has more backbone. It's just going to give you a better chance of getting those bigger fish out away from the bushes. And it's still a 7'6" rod. It's going to make really long casts, which I like, bombing casts down the shoreline and working my way pretty much parallel with the shoreline. But it still works great for skipping baits underneath the mangroves too. Now I will say, transitioning from like a wider creek where I have a lot of room and I can bomb cast on one side or bomb cast on the other side and I have plenty of room around me, I'm transitioning from that down to a smaller creek where I maybe only have like 10 feet on one side, 15 feet on the other side. In that situation, if I have a much smaller space, I will bump down. I'll still use my Osprey CE4000 setup with 20-pound braid, but I'll bump down to a 7-foot 10 to 20 or 7-foot 8 to 17 pound rod. And I find that when I'm in those closer quarters, it's much better to have that smaller rod. I know some people will even go all the way down to a 6-foot 6-inch rod fishing tight creeks or tight mangrove lined creeks, and also in canal systems as well. Anytime you have a narrow waterway, you don't have a lot of room to fight, I highly recommend going with a 7-foot rod or a smaller, a little bit of a shorter rod. Basically, it's going to give you a little more versatility around the boat. It's going to be easier to flip your rod around. You're not going to get hooked up on mangroves as easily. You can kind of maneuver underneath docks if you're fishing docks a little bit easier. And then those smaller rods, I find that they have a little more backbone. You're just cutting down that top 6 inches, and you just end up working the fish a little bit more with the backbone of the rod. And so I find that those 7-foot and 6'6" rods actually help you pull those fish away from the structure a little bit easier. So if you're fishing tight creeks, consider going from a 7'6" down to a 7-foot or maybe a 6'6". And you can still throw the same exact reel. You can still put 20-pound test braid. If you want to, you can bump up to 30-pound. That's a personal preference. I'm pretty confident with my 20-pound. I know I can put a lot of pressure on 20-pound. And so I'll generally will stick with that just because I can make a little bit better cast with my 20-pound. I'm going to transition now to still fishing for snook and redfish. And fishing for snook and redfish under docks. However, I'm going to talk about fishing with live bait. If I'm fishing with live bait, I know more often than not that my bait's going to be sitting in the same place for a while. I'm not making cast after cast after cast, because generally, if you're making cast after cast after cast, you're going to be killing your baits pretty quickly. So if I find a mangrove shoreline and I want to get a bait up underneath it, I'm trying to keep that bait in that area as long as possible. Sometimes I'm using a split shot, sometimes I'm free lining. Sometimes I'm using a full-on weight underneath the dock to keep that bait just in one perfect position the entire time. So when I'm throwing live bait, I'll actually change up gears entirely. I will change up to a Osprey Saltwater Series 4000. Now my Saltwater Series 4000s, I will put 30-pound test braid on because I know I'm fishing heavier structure. I know I'm fishing bigger baits. I know I'm fishing for a little bit bigger fish. Those 30-inch, maybe say 30-inch redfish up to 35-inch snook. And I know that when I'm in that situation, I want a little bit more braid because I know I have a better chance of getting broken off. When I'm throwing artificials, I'm casting underneath the mangroves and I'm pulling it out quickly. If I'm throwing artificials and I'm casting underneath docks, I'm pulling it out quickly. If I'm fishing either of those situations, docks or mangroves, and I'm fishing live bait, that bait's sitting up underneath there as far as I can get it as long as possible. And that means that I need to have a little bit thicker braid, a little bit thicker leader, and it's going to give me a little bit more confidence, a little more braking strength in order to pull those fish out from that structure without breaking off. And additionally, I do like going with the smaller, stouter rods when I'm fishing underneath mangroves or underneath docks in order to pull out those fish. Like I was saying earlier, that like losing that 6 inches on the rod, bumping down to a 7-foot or a 6'6", it allows you to fight more with the butt of the rod. It's just going to give you a little bit more leverage on those fish. It's going to help you turn the fish's head, get them away from that structure, and ultimately it's going to give you a better opportunity to put more fish in the boat. So that's kind of my breakdown, at least for fishing for redfish and trout on the flats, sight fishing and fishing for redfish and trout on the flats when I'm blind casting or just throwing search baits, and also when I'm fishing with live bait up underneath docks and mangroves, or if I'm fishing with artificial lures for snook underneath docks or mangroves. So that's just how I break it down. I want to know what I'm fishing for first and how I'm fishing for that species, and then from there I'm picking and choosing my reels and my rods very carefully. So anyways, that's a pretty broad overview of how to choose the right rod and reel setup for your inshore fishing needs. I hope this was helpful for you guys. If you have any questions, please drop a comment below. I'd be happy to answer your questions. If you have any specific questions about our products, you can email us at info@floridafishingproducts.com, or you can call us at 813-443-4045. We have a team of anglers that are specifically trained and actually are out on the water on a regular basis fishing these products. So they know exactly what you guys need when you're talking with them and talking through a different situation, talking about where you fish and what you fish for. Our guys are trained to help get you the right products for your specific needs. So I really do appreciate the time, guys. Thank you so much for watching our channel and checking out this how-to. If you haven't already, drop a comment below and just let me know some more things we can work on or some different tips and techniques. Also, subscribe to the channel. That allows you to see our content that we're posting every single Tuesday and every single Thursday of every week. So definitely subscribe to the channel. And if you haven't, check out floridafishingproducts.com. That's our bread and butter. That's how we are able to afford this channel. That's how we're able to afford the ability of chasing our dream here in the fishing industry. Selling these products basically keeps the lights on for us. So definitely check out floridafishingproducts.com. And if you guys need anything, feel free to reach out. Our team is more than happy to help. Thank you guys so much for watching, and good fishing.